So Mark Carney's approach is a little bit like the approach that's being taken in the UK, in that he said, within the next few years, I'm going to balance the budget as far as operational items, so healthcare, education, all that sort of stuff that, paying government workers. He's going to get balance the books on that, but that's not going to stop him investing in infrastructure. So he's going to say, okay, we're going to have some growth, and that's going to come from infrastructure investment. We're going to try and drive innovation, which is sort of the approach that the UK government is trying to do, not working terribly well so far. But you know what? I wonder why he actually worries about balancing the budget, because over the last 10 years or so, up to the pandemic, obviously everything blew out everywhere in the world during the pandemic. Yeah. But their government deficit was about 1% of GDP, which is, it's about 3% over that period for the United States. So the UK was somewhere in between the two of them, maybe about 2.5%. So 1% of GDP, you're thinking, well, why worry about that?
This comes down to the problem with Mark Carney is he's an economist. That's the problem, okay? Because economists have made up this meme called the supply and demand diagram, which has infested human brains across the entire planet, and they apply that to every issue, including government spending. And the sticks of supply and demand tell them that if the government spends more than it takes back in taxation, then it borrows money away from households, who of course are the people who save and lend to firms. So therefore, households will have less to lend to firms, and the economy will slow down because of crowding out. That's straight out of the economic text and Bible, and it's complete and utter. I can use French, can't I?
Garbage is the word. Garbage is the word you're looking for.
I was going to say bullshit, but garbage obviously is a better word. Total bullshit.
There we are.
And the only way you can see that is by seeing it in double entry terms. And guess who's the world champion on double entry bookkeeping? Moi. So I've just actually put out a video which was unfortunately a bit too cut for my liking by my crowd on for my online course. But part of it was saying, look, let's put the textbook idea of what banks do, which is banks are intermediaries who enable savers to lend to borrowers, and the government is just another borrower, just like firms. And if the government wants to spend more than it takes back in taxation, then it has to, as well as doing that, it has to borrow the money from the household sector for that gap. And then because it's borrowed the money, it's got debt, so it's got to pay interest on the debt, and it's also required to issue further debt for the interest that it's paying. Well, you put that all together, and what you get is a runaway process in the level of government debt. Even with a 1% of GDP deficit, you rapidly get to the point where the government debt is several orders of magnitude larger than GDP, which of course can't happen.
Particularly then the longer it goes on, the higher the cost of borrowing, so the interest rate goes up.
That's right. It's all going to be absolutely tragic, and it's a tragedy that occurs.
End of the world. End of the world tonight.
End of the world. End of the world as we know it, And that'd be a damn good thing, because it'd get rid of economists. Frankly, I want my entire profession, even if it takes me out in the process, the world would be a better place without them, because it's all nonsense. And the only way you can really see it is by doing the double entry bookkeeping. So guess what I'm going to force you to do?
Right. Okay, here we go. We're going to do that. We're going to do that now, are we? Okay.
We are going to do it now.
Because the others,
we can do it after the break, but it's up to you. Yeah. Okay.
Let's do it after the break, because let's talk about some of the fundamentals first of all. So, so on the one side, I mean, he's wrong. Let's for the moment just say he's wrong to say that he just needs to get rid of the budget deficit, because in doing so, he's going to create hardship, isn't he? He's going to, if he's saying he's going to address all of these issues.
Yeah.
All of the issues that he was trying to face before the pandemic are going to be harder now, because he's not got a good trading relationship with his nearest partner. The world is still recovering from COVID, and things are more expensive now. So the cost of providing the sort of support you needed, and let's not forget one of the biggest issues they face is housing affordability, probably the worst in the world in Canada as well. So you need money to fix all of that. It's going to be next to impossible to say, well, okay. And also an economy now, incidentally, which is in decline. I mean, it's actually, most places are managing to eke out some sort of growth. Not Canada. Canada's growth is in decline right now. Their GDP is shrinking. It doesn't seem like a shrinking GDP is the time to say, oh, by the way, we're going to cut back on how much we're spending from the government, does it?
Oh, no, look, if you cut back on spending and reduce GDP increases. Don't you follow the logic? I mean, it's simple. You reduce something, therefore it grows.
Or you stop spending and you get growth.
Yeah, this is what drives me spare about this stuff, because as soon as you mention government spending more than $1 more than taxation, you get, what about Zimbabwe? Huh? Instant knee-jerk reaction. You don't get people considering the argument you're putting forward. You get a knee-jerk response, and the knee-jerk response starts with bloody economists who've never actually worked out the accounting themselves properly. They just stick with their supply and demand diagrams, and they believe, and this is what they teach politicians. So the fact that Rachel Reeves believes this as well comes out of the fact that she was, did economics PPE somewhere. Carney would have done economics 101. He's done a PhD as well. That doesn't make things better and often makes things worse. So they all believe the textbook version that any government deficit whatsoever is going to lead to ruin. The government should only spend what it takes back in taxation. And that therefore means that our fiat-based economy should have no fiat money in them. And this is the thing which, again, you can only see if you look at how the accounting works.
And you also, the big concern as well is when you start looking at how these, the balancing of budgets is going to be achieved, you do feel as though it's just politicians saying what they want you to hear without any practical sense as to whether it's achievable. So balancing that budget, they're going to spend less on foreign aid. Well, that of course, is an easy one around the world.
Oh, yeah.
Spend less on foreign aid and then wonder why you've got more migrants and more asylum seekers. But anyway, because I think the two might be linked. The revenue agency, how they collect money, they're going to spend less money collecting money thanks to technology. That's going to fix that problem. Veteran affairs, I guess they die.
That is one of the great sayings to err as human to really, I think the word is fuck, up takes a computer. So that should be fun. Okay, let's see.
Computer's going to solve everything.
Absolutely,
and then,
always do.
Less on housing support. So we'll come to that, but basically less caring seems to be the message. So and that is pretty much the global mantra at the moment, isn't it? Really, let's cut back on how much we spend in welfare and how much we spend on foreign countries because they're not us. So Canada's joined that club to try and balance their budget, and that's around the world. We're doing that. So bit by bit, the focus is on becoming less human, I think. Yeah,
that's a damn good idea, because that way we'll be much more like the textbooks. Okay, we'll all be homo economicus who couldn't give a shit about its neighbour, and then we'll work better. We'll all behave like Tasmanian devils and only get together over corpses.
That was a Woody Allen story,
of course,
actually.
But that's by one has to make sacrifices. Yeah.
I don't know what it was called. There was a Woody Allen short story where, just as an aside, he went into a book. He found a way. He had a machine, a bit like The Fly, where you put the fly in the machine and you become the fly. He found a way that you could put a book and you into a machine, and you became a character in this book. And he fell in love with one of the characters in the book. So he kept on going back. And then the reader started to wonder who this strange character was. He kept on appearing in the book, and in the end, he took the heroine out of the book. So, and in the end, I've forgotten what it was. They all, both of them ended up. They thought they had to go back into the book, but they went into the wrong book. And could easily have been that they found themselves in an economics textbook, which would have been a devastating way to spend eternity.
That would have been the end of sex. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. Well, you'd be heavily taxed if you were allowed to do it. So, but the big issue out of all of this for Canada is, I don't know why we went there, is housing affordability, of course. So it's one of the worst in the world. So Canada's homes are 10.4 times the average annual income, which actually is the worst in the G7. According to the table I've got, that compares to 9.1 in the UK. Only 8 in Australia, believe it or not. But I mean, that's, if you look at the capital cities in Australia, obviously it's a very different picture. But just 3.3 times for the United States. So there's the curious thing. Over this border, you go from 3.3 times annual income to 9 times in Canada. So Mark Carney is saying, well, okay, we're going to spend, and Mark Carney's saying we're going to spend less on housing affordability. So the government's going to spend less. So they've got to fix this issue, which obviously has to come, and it's supply might be part of it. But actually, they've not got runaway immigration happening in Canada right now. Not as much as many other parts of the world. So
what
this
about
does
Americans
get back
fleeing
to
north?
Well, maybe there'll be some of that happening now.
Let's
for
hope,
sure. Yeah. Although they'll look and see how much houses cost, and they go, well, we can't afford to do this.
They flee back down south again. So, yeah, that's right.
So maybe it's going to flow the other way. But so housing affordability, well, you can fix that by making houses cheaper, might be one way, or you could make wages higher, so it's more affordable, or you could lower borrowing costs, or you could limit, which is your point, which we made time and time again on this, the amount of money that's available for loans, so that you're not pushing those asset prices higher. But I mean, that strikes me as this is one of the biggest problems Canada's got. If you want to become a more productive nation and encourage more innovative thinking and entrepreneurs to move there, you've got to get rid of ridiculous house prices, haven't you?
Yeah, and what all we've had for the last 40 years really is promoting ridiculous house prices. Because one of the side effects of saying the government shouldn't create money, and that's fundamentally what the neoliberal argument ends up being, they're not aware of it, but that's what they're saying, it means the only creator of the money is the private sector, and the private sector, in Schumpeter's dream of what banking should be, private sector gives money to entrepreneurs. In fact, what it does in the real world, it gives money to entrepreneurs if they own a house, and which they can then mortgage. So it's security-based lending. And what that means is that to get the private sector money created, you've got to create a housing bubble, which is what's happened for the last 40 or 50 years. The increase in, globally, the increase in the ratio of house prices to consumer prices. America actually comes out at almost the bottom of that list in real terms, like inflation, adjusted for inflation and consumer prices. House prices in America only 2.5 times what they were in 1970, so 2.5 times as relatively expensive. The UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, large parts of Europe, it's 4 to 6 times. And so that's been the side effect.
So why has the United States escaped that?
It's because it had a housing price crash. Fundamentally, this is like I made the mistake of helping Australia prevent its housing price crash by scaring the pants off Kevin Rudd so much that he doubled and trebled the amount of money the Australian government gave to first-home buyers, so the bubble continued. Canada, the bubble has never really burst either. In New Zealand, the same. So in all these countries, the trend has continued on. America had a huge bust, and then it's reboomed again. So house prices now in America are higher in real terms than they were at the peak of the subprime bubble. But fundamentally, that break in the trend is why America is not at the same level of unaffordability the rest of the world is.
Now, the problem, of course, is the longer you go without that crash, the worse it becomes, because so much money is tied up in housing, and so much of that wealth effect from people thinking, well, we can borrow against our house, and if the house price goes down, they go into, well, basically the economy's ruined. The economy tanks.
Yeah, and this is why I worked out a scheme that could actually enable you to reduce that level of high household debt and help house prices fall without sending homeowners into bankruptcy. But if that involves using government money creation power, and just like every other politician on the planet, with the exception of people not yet in power like Zach Palensky in the UK, they all believe the government shouldn't run a deficit, and therefore they can't even get to first base with the proposal that I've made to reduce excessive household debt and reduce house prices.
Which is the idea of having some sort of moratorium, some sort of
or a modern debt
amnesty.
Jubilee. My idea was I put it forward in a recent video, and that was to simply create government money, which the government does simply by passing a law, to create to give $100,000. In the American case, I was using as an example, $100,000 per adult. So Rupert Murdoch would get $100,000, and so would a homeless person on the streets of San Francisco. If you had debt, they were applied to pay the debt down. So Rupert would knock his debt down by $100,000. The homeless person, hopefully with no debts, would get $100,000, which, if they weren't a homeowner, if they didn't have any debt, they'd get the bonds equivalent to that amount of money. So no money would be created in this process. If you have a mortgage, you'd be required to pay $100,000 off the mortgage. So the trick of this is that there's no actual increase in the money supply in the private sector, but you reduce the level of private debt. And for those who didn't get involved in the speculative bubble that gave us these ridiculous house prices in the first place, you get a bond and an income stream. So you don't get penalised for not having taken part in the speculative orgy of the last 40 years.
So I've got lots of questions about that, which means it almost certainly, I mean, we've talked about it in the past, but it's almost certainly, let's do a podcast specifically on the idea of the debt jubilee, because we haven't visited that for a while. But Mark Carney's idea is just, which is the common one, isn't it? Build more houses and address housing affordability by ensuring that there's more affordable housing. But when housing is on average 10 times your income, how do you do that?
Yeah, well, it's simple. You don't. All these. I mean, the idea that the private sector will profit out of producing, making cheap houses for people who can't afford expensive ones, unless it's profitable, they're not going to do it. And with the price they've got to pay to buy the land in the first instance, and that's actually the basic cause of the price rise, not the house itself being more expensive to build, but the land on which it's built being more expensive to buy. There's never
because you look at the builders are not actually making a mozza out of all of this. It's not sort of like they're not like the tech bros that are recording these massive profits. No, they are. Some of them are going out and going under as part of the process.
Yeah. And they will continue going under because there's no profit in selling houses to poor people. You can rent them, maybe, but you certainly can't sell them. So the whole idea that the private sector is going to build these houses is just nonsense. You've got something which is not profitable, and if you want it to be done, then you don't want a profit-making enterprise to create it. And who are you left with? The government, which means the government's got to run a deficit. But hey, back to rule one of Carney's policy, he's not going to do that. So Canadians are stuck.
Well, because
they're stuck in maple syrup, let's say.
So he's saying in his 2025 plan, they're going to spend $51 billion over the next 10 years for local infrastructure. So that's housing, roads, health facilities. $51 billion out of the $5 trillion that they're going to spend over the next 10 years. So that's 1%. You're not going to get very far with that, are you?
No. It's window dressing. Looks good. It's something you can put in an electoral manifesto. It'll have probably won't get implemented and have no bloody effect if it is.
So the other thing is, are they going to be able to grow without population growth, without more? And this is again, Canada's facing the same problems that a lot of the rest of the world's facing, but it's got the added problem that it might not be able to trade as much with its dominant trading partner. But the issues about aging population, government's not spending enough are the same as the rest of the world. So on the aging population, 19% of the population is over 65 right now in Canada, compared to 16% just across that border, 16% in the United States. It's going to be close to 1 in 4 in the next 10 years in Canada. So, and they've had quite a bit of population growth over the last 10 years, but it's slowed right back now. I mean, you'd say the sensible policy surely would be, although I know it's sort of like a short-term policy. There's not a long-term magic bullet, but you'd be saying, yes, let's go for younger migrants while we try and figure out what we're going to do long-term, because otherwise you're going to have this.
This is
you're
always
going to have this problem with an aging population.
Yeah, but this is always trying to find a solution outside your own borders. And everybody's trying to encourage migrants while at the same time they're trying to stop refugees. I mean, it's a circus. So I really believe human population is going to fall. There's two possible ways it's going to happen: pleasantly or unpleasantly. And at the moment, it's pleasantly, in the sense that we're not all being starved to death or being wiped out by floods. But the part of the reason why we have a unsustainable ecological situation on the planet is an unsustainable population. That's something the Limits to Growth stated back in 1972. It said that we should stabilise population in 1975. That was their desired. The only scenario they looked at, which did not lead to a complete breakdown sometime in the 20th century, involved reducing pollution by a factor of 4 starting in 1975, increasing per unit material throughput in factories also by a factor of 4, also starting in 75, and stabilised population in 75. We've done none of the above, and population now, I think globally, is about 2.5 times what it was in 1975, certainly double. So, I give up on anybody who thinks population growth is the solution to our problems. You haven't seen the real problem yet.
Right. But you'd think for Canada, though, there's a bit of room there. more than most places. I mean, if you looked at a map of the world and said, well, okay, where is there arable land, or where is there a capability to support a population, and where is too dense a population, and I think I'm living in one of those countries, and where can we fly for miles and not see a single human being? You go, well, bit of balance here. I mean, surely Canada can take more, and that would be a benefit for their economy, presumably.
Yeah, I mean, if you look where Canadians live, most of them are within 50 miles of America. It's too damn cold further north. Some Canadians are going to bash me about the head for saying that, but nonetheless, it's cold. You're on the periphery of inhabitable land at the moment. Given global warming, maybe more of it's becoming inhabitable, but you're going to have to put up with mudslides and absence of topsoil for a while to do that. So, I'm not going to entertain the population solution. The real solution is understanding how the bloody government works in the first place. And we're electing somebody who understands that rather than the bloody conventional economist, which is what you're getting with Carney. And this just shows no matter how socially progressive you are, if you believe economic theory, you're a reactionary.
Right. Now, I know you're madly keen for us to get into looking at your model, but let's not do that this week. Let's do that. Let's do another episode on that, because I want us to explore in a more general sense Canada's approach, and then maybe next week we'll do that, because there's also innovation and defence and other areas of investment that Canada's trying to push ahead with. And I want to look at those when we come back on the Debunking Economics podcast. We're talking Canada. Two uninformed people talking about Canada. And let's be honest about this. I mean, we know what we've read from online. We don't know the country particularly well. We know we've got a big audience there. You keep on saying, talk about Canada. And maybe we should get one of you guys on. But anyway.
I've got a few Canadian friends. We can try that. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, more about Canada when we come back. And, I know a lot of it applies anyway, just generally to what other economies are trying to do. Like for example, in the UK, trying to follow this same model of let's cut back on our operational expenditure and let's just invest in infrastructure. Question is, what is that infrastructure, and is it really going to achieve the aims? And we'll look at that when we come back on the Debunking Economics podcast. So, Steve, the one thing Mark Carney also wants to do is push infrastructure investment so that you'll get growth. Now, I have to say, I've been in Sydney recently, going back again soon, and I was staggered actually by just how much public investment there is in public transport going on. New infrastructure everywhere, new buildings going up as a result of that, and it's quite encouraging. And there's a feeling of confidence in Sydney, and I'm sure I feel it's the same thing is happening in Melbourne, from what I understand. Infrastructure investment can work if it's the right sort, and actually, public transport's a pretty good start, isn't it? Because it helps you to sort out where people live. It expedites journeys to work. It provides hubs for retail investment. I mean, it's an old-fashioned way of spending money to drive growth, but I think it works, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, it does. And this is one, just to come back to the Carney issue and the whole idea of balancing the budget. If what he's saying was going to balance the budget for current expenditure but go into deficit for capital expenditure, which is pretty much what this sounds like, then that's a way of getting around the mainstream objections that are saying a government deficit is always a bad thing. So I've got to give Carney a certain amount of potential credit there if that's what he's doing.
That's what the UK government's trying to do as well. That's their argument too.
Yeah.
Same one.
They're still going to try to slash the budget. I mean, they're going to freeze pensioners to lay railroad tracks to where the pensioners used to be alive in. So there's all sorts of dilemmas like that. But fundamentally, I don't think Reeves is aware of this. This is a bit of an intelligence assessment, but she seems more like a public relations person for an economics textbook than she does a thinking individual. Carney seems to have a certain amount of brain power, so maybe he's aware of what he can get away with and knows that he's got to continue pushing out the mantra of balanced budgets, but this is the way that people would accept spending more, and it's something which works as well. So maybe he's doing that. So that's not quite so depressing for Canada. I think it's quite depressing for the UK, but maybe Carney's being slightly more intelligent there. But yeah, this is one reason the Chinese are succeeding so well, because when you put down giant infrastructure projects which dramatically reduce the costs for private businesses, then those costs are investments the private sector would never actually undertake itself, which benefit the private sector enormously. So like when in China's one of the classic examples is that province, I've forgotten the name of it, but it's one of the provinces with thousands of bridges. And the thing is, it's so hilly, so mountainous that all the towns are isolated. And what the Chinese have done in the last 30 or 40 years is whack thousands of bridges into this province so that people who used to take, say, if you went by the mountain roads, you might take an hour to get from one town to another. Now you take 5 minutes to get from one town to another. And that's a cost which the private sector would never undertake because this is the whole idea of public goods. They're things which the individual demand can be enormous, but no individual person can pay the price, and nobody can make a profit by promising to build it. They're given the length of time it'd take to build something like that. So the financing costs alone rule out the possibility of even doing it, let alone the engineering and so on. China does it, bang, you've got a province which used to be economically backward. It's now connected, and you can get dramatic growth in private industry because of the public provision of infrastructure. And Canada is, in that sense, the fact that it's a linear society to a large extent. You got it starts in Vancouver and ends in roughly Ottawa. I won't include Sydney, Canada there. There's plenty of room to imagine having infrastructure transport corridors along that ribbon, and then running others up to where the resources are. So it's feasible to imagine the infrastructure improving Canadian lives and reducing private sector costs in Canada as well.
But will it increase productivity? Because that is the big problem they've had. Their productivity has not grown as much over the last 10 years as it has in the United States or even places like the UK, I think, for whatever reason. I guess perhaps a large part of it is because it's resource-based. But then there's been big productivity gains in the resource sector, hasn't there? Because, a lot of mechanization has helped in that sector. But, I mean, his big push, like everywhere around the world, there's this magic solution. We're going to increase productivity. I guess that's because if you put it into your GDP spreadsheet and you can just change that figure of productivity just a little bit, it's one of those multiplier impacts, isn't it? It has a big impact on on what your GDP growth is, and everything looks fine and dandy from that point.
Yep, and there's good reason why that happens as well, because as I said, you're reducing your costs dramatically by providing infrastructure which enables commerce to occur between regions that it couldn't be commercially linked beforehand. So you will get an increase in productivity out of those infrastructure investments. But one of the big mistakes in thinking about productivity is we always measure it in terms of how much output per worker, as if workers worked harder, they'd be more productive. That's not how you grow productivity at all. It's new technology that comes along that means you have less workers per machine, and the machine gets more energy throughput, and it's actually energy per machine that goes up. That's what gives you rising productivity. Now, I don't know how well Canada's done on creating its own mechanised technology for exploiting its mineral resources and so on. But that's what you need, and in that front, China's done it brilliantly. Norway's done it quite well as well. So there are potential examples for Canada to latch onto. But it's still, it's again, this whole idea about having to get productivity up is because they don't believe there's any other way to create the demand. And there is the government money creation, which they're stifling, is part of the normal demand of a capitalist economy. And they're actually reducing demand and reducing many elements which can lead to that increase in productivity over time. So if you have the trap of believing the government has to balance its books, then the only thing you can talk about is increasing productivity. And then the question is, how do you go about that? How do you get the new investments made? And that's where politicians, it ends up being public relations at that point, and they have no idea how to go forward.
Yeah, or the plans are going to have such a small incremental impact. And then also what quite often happens is they'll say, well, to demonstrate how committed we are to this, we're going to start with productivity gains in the public sector. But how do you measure? Spending. Yeah, which is the only way, because the only way you can do that, isn't it? Because you've got no measure of output by and large, unless you go.
Well, this is one of the. Yeah. this is one of the
we're
myths
looking after the same number of sick people, but we're doing it with less doctors and nurses.
Yeah.
But what about the quality of that care? You can say we're more productive.
Your local hairdresser can do just as good a job of stitching you up after an accident as a surgeon can. Just get the scissors out and cut away.
Still a person, isn't it? And they might take longer. So I mean, if you look at the health sector, you go, well, okay, yeah, because the only way you can improve productivity is saying, we're going to have less hours worked for the same output, which would be the number of people stitched up and still alive.
And that's the fiction.
But how are you measuring that? Or maybe more of them die, but that's a productivity gain because
that's true. Yeah.
More people are dying because therefore you need less doctors. So how do you measure when there's nothing being sold at the end, which is what the public sector is all about?
And look, this is a huge part of the decline of Australian public service over time. I was in the public service at the time. The Industry Assistance Commission started recommending productivity gains be built into government budgets. And so what would happen every year, the government departments would be told, we expect it to be 1.5% more productive next year, so you give you 1.5% less resources indefinitely. And that just basically starves the private sector in the same way a focus upon a balanced budget starves the public sector. So it's quite disastrous. And you end up, you start getting people with a bit of technical education taking over the job of surgeons. It's disastrous, but that's part of the ruse. Again, another way to reduce government spending, because the basic objective of neoclassical economics is to get rid of the government.
Yeah, and let's see how that works out. Well, Donald Trump's giving a good go at that, isn't he? So let's see how it works.
As long as he got rid of the government, he's hanging on to the king.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
just
important.
a small corral. Productivity, by the way, for Canada, just so how far they've got to go, it improved over the last 10 years. It improved by 0.3% per year, which is one of the worst in the G7. So the US grew by 1.3% per year, for example. But of course, the US has got this advantage that it's got all these tech firms which are making loads more money with fewer and fewer people. The more money they make, the more they seem to lay people off. So all of that, when it's such a dominant part of the economy, is going to show up as a productivity gain. It's going to create a lot of unemployment, but it's going to show as a productivity gain. A place like Canada don't have that unless they say, well, okay, we need to get our own Silicon Valley. But the horse has already bolted on that. So the hope of matching the US on productivity is just a pipe dream, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And again, you don't have this. You've got the same scale in some sense, but you don't have the same open plane and the enormous market scale that America has to encourage things like deciding you're going to restart 3 Mile Island to get your AI center running, which was one of Microsoft plans. That scale is just beyond any other country on the planet except America and China, really. So again, the fact that Canada lacks the scale locks them out of doing that sort of thing, which is another reason that Donald Trump's crazy offer is moderately tempting. It's just a pity it comes with American culture rather than Canadian culture.
Yeah, exactly. If it was the other way,
or
we'll give you the business, you give us the culture. Maybe that. But then that's a big job, isn't it? Overcoming Donald Trump's crassness on a massive scale. I don't think that could be achieved by anybody. So the other thing that Mark Carney is looking at is tax breaks to try and drive into investment, to try and drive up that productivity. So he's looking at tax deductions, for example, if you are the marginal tax rate for investments. So first of all, and this is done the world over. So if you invest, you can write it off straight away in the first year. Yeah. But also if you're investing in stuff that is going to drive productivity. So you invest $1 million in a machine, for example. You pay sales tax on buying that machine, first of all. We get rid of that. That's an easy win, isn't it? And then the machine creates 20% more output, for example, than you were getting before. But you're going to get taxed on that 20%. So he's looking at the marginal tax rate for this incremental productivity gains that he gets. So he wants to make that the lowest in the G7. So if you're investing £1 million or $1 million, wherever you want to be, it's going to be cheaper for the productivity gains to do that in Canada than anywhere else.
And this is wonderful because all countries
incentives
in the world are doing this simultaneously. So they're all going to get more investment from the rest of the world than they have domestically. It's going to work for everybody because, as we know, the planet is not a zero-sum game. I mean, it's the extent to which all these parties come up with the same ideas, which conflict with the same ideas in different countries. How is Britain going to go faster? It's going to encourage foreign investment. How is Canada going to go faster? It's going to encourage foreign investment. How is America going to go faster? Rinse and repeat. And you find that the only way that works is if we find another planet that's willing to invest in the Earth. And I think Mars gave on that a long time ago.
Yeah. That is the problem, isn't it? So, because everybody is looking at their as though they are going to create some sort of advantage over everybody else, and everyone is
on what is a zero-sum game platform, and this is the crazy thing. So it's just a sign that they don't understand their own domestic machinery, and if you don't understand the domestic machinery, of course you can't work out how to grow more rapidly, or in that case become more congruent with the ecology. It's all a case of what can we get the foreigner to do. The thing is, once there are on the entire planet of Earth, there are 0 foreigners, unless Area 51 is actually real. So
So you're right, absolutely. It's not looking domestically, is it? In every single case, it's how can we get how can we get someone else to come in to help us with this?
Yep, that's right.
Fair point. So, and then there's this whole, which again is happening around the world, this big increase in defence spending. Now you could say, well, this is
blowing the shit out of each other also dramatically increases other's productivity too. Yeah,
it does. Well, we're going to blow the shit out of each other that much faster than we did before, with less weaponry.
Wars are going to be more productive.
Exactly. There's a scenario where we can show the gains, isn't it? And quite successfully, I would have thought. So defence spending in Canada was around 18 to 24 billion a year, up to 2021, from the mid-2010s to 2021. So now, this year, it's 36 billion. So it's getting close to being 100% increase. So it's basically doubling. Now, they are, it is quite low in Canada. It's about even with that, it's still only about $700 per person compared to about $3,000 per person in the United States. But there's going to be more, so spending more. The only thing is, Canada spends more on defence. And I'm not sure who they're defending themselves against. They can't be defending themselves against the United States with its threat to annex them, because they are buying almost all of that budget is being spent on buying weaponry from the United States.
From America,
yeah. So I'm not sure what they gain from that, apart from pacifying Donald Trump, perhaps, and maybe that's part of it, because he wants everybody to spend more money on defense because America creates a lot of the weaponry that the world uses.
Yeah, I mean. It's the blow shit up approach to achieving economic growth. It's rather wonderful that you could destroy something and have it grow at the same time.
Yeah, but then it is commerce. It's and if that's seen as
fair in love and war. Yeah.
But it's not a productive output, is it? So if Canada says yes,
exactly.
well, we're going.
The definition
this
of
is not part of our.
You don't want this shit to be used. You want it to grow old in a retirement home for nuclear warheads, not ever be go out and have a party over somebody else's city, let alone your own. So you want to make this stuff and never use it.
Yeah. So if his approach is to say, well, yes, we are going to operationally, we're going to be, we're not going to have a government deficit. All the deficit spending is going to go on investment, and then you're counting defense as one of those huge items of investment. That's not going to get your aim of productivity at the end of the day. That's just sunk money. Yeah.
It's like the best way to regard defense, certainly in the American case, it's welfare for the military companies that supply the military-industrial complex. So the whole idea that this is growth, the only thing you can say in favour of defence spending is nobody ever says, where's the pay, how are you going to pay for it? Okay, it bypasses that particular meme in people's heads. They don't even think about it. Oh, yeah, we've got to blow the shit out of our enemies, so more money on defence is a good idea. No question of where the money comes from. Whereas if you want to keep people from freezing to death as pensioners, we can't afford it. Where's the money going to come from? So you probably solve it by having Canadian weapons taking out British pensioners. That'd mean you wouldn't have to worry about the cutting them off from the for fuel subsidy. They'd already been blown up by a Canadian bomb. It's a win-win, I think.
And reduces the UK's pension obligations.
That's right.
So,
So
increases
if each country can use their weapons to take out the pensioners of every other country, then I think we're going to see a dramatic increase in productivity.
Yeah, now we're talking. Absolutely.
I'm sorry, we are becoming holding a straight face here.
So, we're becoming so heartless, aren't we, globally?
Oh, yeah.
That, it's just
ridiculous.
Only a matter of time.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, just finishing off on Canada, that Mark Carney, because he's not doing too well so far, because it does seem like a lot of PR points, doesn't it, really? Well, it would be good if we got a bit more productivity, so we'll do what the rest of the world's doing on that. We will not spend any money on any extra money on looking after our people, because we're going to balance the budget, so there's going to be a bit of hardship, and already we've got a negative growth in our economy, so we've already got a taste of how that's going to work out. But look, we're going to spend a lot of money on investment, but a lot of that's actually going to go on defence. So then the other element of all of this is we've got almost all of our trade currently is with the United States, because they are just over the border. But we are now going to diversify. So 450 billion is sold to the US each year, 23 billion to China, 20 billion to the UK. 450 billion to the US. I'm not quite sure. Even if you move 10% of that, you're still not changing the dial, are you? So there's this idea that we're going to diversify exports to other destinations is a bit unrealistic. I mean, just look at the numbers. It's more or less the United States. That's it.
Yeah,
You're stuck with that. You're not going to change that.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's looking for an external solution to an internal problem. And every country on the planet's going to export more to the rest of the world, which is great. That's why we have to find another planet to take up the trade with us, because the sum of all exports on the planet is zero. So we've got to find another planet to export to, and then we'll be okay. I hear Venus is nice this time of year.
Yeah. So what are we saying then about Mark Carney? That because he seems like
the only thing we can say in
guy.
favour, hopefully he realises that his little ruse of saying balance the budget for continuous expenditure and allow borrowing for infrastructure may actually be a clever way to get around the mental block that the whole of the planet has had by accepting textbook economics to believe the government should run a balanced budget. If he's doing it that way, then that's his positive. But the proof will be in the eating of the pudding. Will he be slashing spending on health? Will Canadians find that they don't get dental care anymore? That sort of thing, as a way of causing infrastructure growth. I'd be surprised. I'd like to be surprised, but I'd be surprised if he's different to the usual brand of economist turned politician.
Because you would have thought there's every opportunity going for Canada, wouldn't you? Because if they got it right, if they said, well, we're going to invest in our cities, we're going to use government money to build up good, strong public transport networks and all sorts of other social benefits, but also just things that are going to improve the quality of life for people living in Canada. So that an American company might say, do you know what, we should move north of the border because it's cheaper to hire people, there's a better infrastructure, maybe we pay less tax, and get the benefit. I mean, it's an external solution, but it's just across the border external solution. They should be competing with America. It's going to be hard in the current regime. But having some sort of free trade agreement where you say, well, that's going to work both ways, but the benefit for everybody is going to be that there's going to be collectively greater outputs, and Canada just benefits from being the good place to live. Pleasant cities with good infrastructure. That would be their way forward, surely. And I'm being saying, by the way, come over here because we've got better healthcare.
Yeah, Donald's going to love that, because he's not trying to encourage the opposite direction of Canadian firms investing in America.
Yeah.
Again, if you want to see a politician who hasn't got an idea, it's a politician who's talking about external ways of solving an internal problem, and that's just another one in that particular bracket.
Yeah. All right. Well, so I mean, it's going to be a tough road then, isn't it? Until Donald Trump's not around anymore, and they can get, because in theory at the moment, what are the 35% tariff on Canadian goods at the moment if it's not part of the US Canada Mexico agreement, the USMCA agreement? which actually is a lot. Basically, in other words, they get tariffed on cars that haven't been made largely in Canada unless the parts come from the United States. But I think even though that's quite a hefty tariff, I think most of the goods actually which are transitioning between the two countries are exempt, and a lot of them are small scale shipments which are exempt anyway. So so cottage industries actually, and you would have thought Canada could do quite well for shipping small value products into the United States, maybe rather than this massive infrastructure investments. But so we'll see how Mark Carney does. But at the moment, it's just a bit of skepticism.
Just a bit of skepticism. Another economist running a country. What else could possibly go wrong? Answer is a hell of a lot.
Yeah. And they are. They are stuck with America. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And they just have to hope that Donald Trump is not superseded by someone who has the same.
Plate tectonics will ultimately help them get away, but it's going to take a few billion years.
Oh, that's all. All right, very good. Look, we'll let you get your models out next time. So be prepared. If you're listening only, that might be heavy going. If you're watching, it'll be heavy going too. But we'll try and we'll try and demonstrate a bit more about why governments can spend more. We'll do that next time. All right, thanks, Steve.
On the Debunking Economics podcast with me and Phil Dowie. Pardon me.
Love the way you do that. Thank you.
Okay, mate. See you next week.